This evening at Fort Hood, a candlelight vigil. This community of American soldiers and their families, a community that has endured so much. No other military installation has suffered more casualties in Iraq and Afghanistan. They came together this evening at Fort Hood to pray, to mourn, to remember. What happened here yesterday happened fast. On an ordinary November afternoon, the post became a combat zone.
People started screaming from outside the theater, coming inside.
What were they screaming?
There's shooting going on outside, and one guy came in and he had gotten shot in the back.
Specialist Elliot Valdez is an Army journalist. He was getting ready to film a graduation ceremony when the rampage began in a building nearby. Valdez grabbed his camera and ran to the building, a processing center for soldiers preparing to deploy overseas, and he kept filming. What he saw staggered him.
When I was moving this scene here on Fort Hood, honestly, I was thinking this is like Iraq. Going in there with my camera with just craziness, people yelling, you know, bumping into you just all around, trying to get out of the way because nobody knew what was going on.
What was going on was a massacre.
That's when I turned and ran out the building and
that's when he started
shooting towards me.
Specialist Marquez Smith was inside the processing center when he and other witnesses say Major Nidal Malik Hassan opened fire. Hassan was carrying two handguns, a 5.7mm pistol and a .357 Magnum revolver. Inside the processing center, Specialist Smith, like so many others, risked his own life. He moved in to help, pulling people to safety even as Hassan turned towards him.
I went back in the building and looking for more people that was in the building, which I didn't see. And when I turned to run, that's when I started hearing rounds going past my body, hitting the wall.
Smith was lucky. A ricochet hit his boot, but did not wound him.
It's a round hole. Well, one of the rounds went in my boot.
So it went through both sides?
No, it just went in and was lodged in my boot.
Others were not so lucky. In Ogden, Utah, Aggie Foster got word that her son Joe was in the hall and hit.
My legs buckled. One of the nurses shoved a chair underneath me. And they looked at me and they go, "What?" And I says, "My son just got shot. Joey just got shot."
Shot in the hip, Joe Foster is recuperating. Aggie Foster says he told her how Hassan shot him.
He told me that he was like 20 feet away. The guy jumped up and started yelling in Arabic, and he pulled out his gun and started shooting people.
Specialist Kira Bono was there too. She saw Hassan shooting and was hit in the back and the top of her head.
The man stood up and he said, "Allah Akma," or something of that sort. And he started firing, and I'm sure one of the first couple shots he fired off is what grazed the top of my head.
Bono couldn't believe it. Hassan, she realized, was carrying out a massacre.
It seemed like it would never end. It seemed like he was just firing over and over again. He fired quite a few rounds.
Major Hassan kept firing. He reloaded and headed outside. Just then, about 3 minutes after the first 911 calls, Fort Hood police officer Kimberly Munley arrived at the scene after rushing from a nearby gas station. Chuck Medley is her boss, the director of emergency services on post.
She responded to the scene, saw some injured and scared people trying to move out of the area. She got some information either through sight or sound that the suspect was between a set of buildings.
Attention! Seek shelter immediately.
Then came an astonishing showdown. Munley rounded a corner of the building and confronted Hassan, who was firing at a wounded soldier. She opened fire on Hassan. He spun towards her and shot back. The two exchanged fire, both of them going down. Sergeant Mark Todd then fired one more round at Hassan, finally stopping the rampage.
He went down, and she eliminated the threat. She did what she was trained to do. This protocol of active shooter to move in and eliminate that threat immediately requires courage and skill. She's a highly skilled police officer. She's a member of our special reaction team, which is our SWAT team here on Fort Hood.
She's a hero.
Yes, sir. She's a hero.
Soldiers were rushing to the scene, whether they were trained as first responders or not. They ran to the sound of the guns. Sergeant Andrew Hagerman is an MP.
There were multiple people wounded everywhere that soldiers were treating. If it wasn't for those soldiers that came over, even with the thought of someone still shooting and stuff like that, to treat these people, to come out of other buildings and treat, there would have been a lot more loss yesterday. They saved countless lives yesterday by what they did.
All the while, Elliot Valdez kept filming the scene, his mission. He saw Hassan down on the ground. Was he cuffed?
No, he was not cuffed. He was actually very immobile, and I actually thought he was dead at the time. And at the time, I didn't even know that that was him.
It was over. But for 13 families across the country, the families of Hassan's victims, what he did in those few minutes will never be truly over. Among the dead, 21-year-old FRANCHESKA VELEZ, just back from Iraq, on her way home to Chicago because she was pregnant.
She was just a great person, and it's very sad that her life was taken away from her.
29-year-old Amy KRUEGER joined the Army after 9/11. She was to be deployed to Afghanistan, just as Nidal Hassan was. And for the family of Michael Pearson, who had joined the Army so he could enroll in college and major in musical theory, the reality has not yet sunk in.
It still doesn't seem real to me. I don't know. I'm still wondering what happened.
It was a day the tight-knit community of Fort Hood will never forget, but not just because of the horror, because of the heroism, too. What were your feelings? What went through your mind that here you were on Fort Hood and this was unfolding before you and your camera?
You know, just getting there, and you know, you see the stretchers and people laying on the ground. That's tough.
It was an exceptional scene. It was a terrible, terrible thing, but let me tell you something. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Been up for 48 hours, guys. I'm sorry. These soldiers are America's best example of how we go about doing things right in this country.
Today, Specialist Kira Bono, shot in the head and the back, then pulled to safety by her fellow soldiers, was reunited with her family. Specialist Bono was scheduled to ship out to Iraq next month. One final note, in those few terrifying moments, there were more than 100 shots exchanged by Hassan and those who were trying to stop him. There will be a memorial service here at Fort Hood sometime next week as this community tries to heal.